22. It was about 10:30 when the little yellow-slashed Mexican orchestra got tired of playing a low-voiced prettied-up rumba that nobody was dancing to. The gourd player rubbed his fingertips together as if they were sore and got a cigarette into his mouth almost with the same movement. The other four, with a timed, simultaneous swoop, reached under their chairs for glasses from which they sipped, smacking their lips and flashing their eyes. Tequila, their manner said. It was probably mineral water. The pretense was as wasted as the music. Nobody was looking at them. The room had been a ballroom once, and Eddie Mars had changed it only as much as his business compelled him. No chromium glitter, no indirect lighting from behind angular cornices, no fused glass pictures or chairs in violet leather and polished metal tubing, none of the pseudo-modernistic circus of the typical Hollywood night trap. The light was very heavy, crystal chandeliers and the rose damask panels of the wall were still the same rose damask, a little faded by time and darkened by dust, that had been matched long ago against the parquetry floor, of which only a small glass smooth space in front of the little Mexican orchestra showed bare. The rest was covered by a heavy old rose carpeting that must have cost plenty. Parquetry was made of a dozen kinds of hardwood, from Burma teak through half of a dozen shades of oak and ruddy wood that looked like mahogany, and faded out to the hard, pale, wild lilac of the California hills, all laid in elaborate patterns, with the accuracy of a transit. It was still a beautiful room, and now there was a roulette in it instead of a measured, old-fashioned dancing. There were 3 tables close to the far wall. A low bronze railing joined them and made a fence around the croupiers. All 3 tables were working, but the crowd was at the middle one. I could see Vivian Reagan's black head close to it. From across the room where I was, leaning against the bar and turning a small glass of Bacardi around on the mahogany, the bartender leaned beside me watching a cluster of well-dressed people at the middle table. "She's picking 'em tonight. Right on the nose," he said. "That tall, black-headed frail. Who is she?" "I wouldn't know her name. She comes here a lot, though." "The hell you wouldn't know her name." "I just work here, mister," he said without any animosity. "She's all alone, too. The guy that was with her passed out. They took him out to his car." "I'll take her home," I said. "The hell you will." "Well, I wish you luck anyways. Should I gentle up that Bacardi or do you like it the way it is?" "I like it the way it is as well as I like it at all," I said. "Me? I'd just as lief drink croup medicine," he said. The crowd parted and 2 men in evening clothes pushed their way out, and I saw the back of her neck and her bare shoulders in the opening. She wore a low-cut dress of dull green velvet. It looked too dressy for the occasion. The crowd closed and hid all but her black head. The 2 men came across the room and leaned against the bar and asked for scotch and soda. One of them was flushed and excited. He was mopping his face with a black bordered handkerchief. The double satin stripes down the side of his trousers were wide enough for tire tracks. "Boy, I never saw such a rut," he said in a jittery voice. "2 wins and 2 standoffs in a row on the red. On that red. That's roulette, boy, that's roulette." "It gives me the itch," the other one said. "She's betting $1,000 at a crack. She can't lose." They put their beaks in their drinks, gurgled swiftly, and went back. "So wise the little men are," the barkeeper drawled. $1,000 a crack, huh? I saw an old horse face in Havana once." The noise swelled over at the middle table, and a chiseled foreign voice rose above it, saying, "If you will just be patient a moment, madam. The table cannot cover your bet. Mr. Mars will be here in a moment." I left my Bacardi and padded across the carpet. The little orchestra started to play a tango, rather loud. No one was dancing or intending to dance. I moved through a scattering of people in dinner clothes and full evening dress and sports clothes and business suits to the end table at the left. It had gone dead. Two croupiers stood behind it with their heads together and their eyes sideways. One moved the rake back and forth aimlessly over the empty layout. They were both staring at Vivian Regan. Her long lashes twisted and her face looked unnaturally white. She was at the middle table, exactly opposite the wheel. There was a disordered pile of money and chips in front of her. It looked like a lot of money. She spoke to the croupier with a cool, insolent, ill-tempered drawl. "What kind of a cheap outfit is this? I'd like to know. Get busy and spin that wheel, high pockets. I want one more play and I'm playing table stakes. You take it away fast enough, I've noticed. But when it comes to dishing it out, you start to whine." The croupier smiled a cold, polite smile that had looked at thousands of boors and millions of fools. His tall, dark, disinterested manner was flawless. He said gravely, "The table cannot cover your bets, madam. You have over $16,000 there. It's your money." The girl jeered, "Don't you want it back?" A man beside her tried to tell her something. She turned swiftly and spat something at him, and he faded back into the crowd, red-faced. A door opened in the paneling at the far end of the enclosed place made by the bronze railing. Eddie Mars came through the door with a set, indifferent smile on his face, his hands thrust into the pockets of his dinner jacket, both thumbnails glistening outside. He seemed to like that pose. He strolled behind the croupiers and stopped at the corner of the middle table. He spoke with lazy calm, less politely than the croupier. "Something the matter, Mrs. Regan?" She turned her face to him with a sort of lunge. I saw the curve of her cheeks stiffen, as if with an almost unbearable inner tautness. She didn't answer him. Eddie Moss said gravely, "If you're not playing anymore, you must let me send someone home with you." The girl flushed. Her cheekbones stood out white in her face. Then she laughed off key. She said bitterly, "One more play, Eddie. Everything I have on the red, I like red, is the color of blood." Eddie Mars smiled faintly, then nodded and reached into his inner breast pocket. He drew out a large pin-seal wallet with cold corners and tossed it carelessly along the table to the croupier. "Cover a bet in even thousands," he said. "If no one objects to this turn of the wheel being just for the lady." No one objected. Vivian Regan leaned down and pushed all her winnings savagely with both hands onto the large red diamond on the layout. The croupier leaned over the table without haste. He counted and stacked her money and chips and placed all but a few chips and bills in a neat pile and pushed the rest back off the layout with his rake. He opened Eddie Mar's wallet and drew out 2 flat packets of $1,000 bills. He broke one and counted 6 bills out, added them to the unbroken packet, put the 4 loose bills in the wallet and laid it aside as carelessly as if it had been a packet of matches. Eddie Mars didn't touch the wallet. Nobody moved except for the croupier. He spun the wheel left-handed and sent the ivory ball skidding along the upper edge with a casual flirt of his wrist. Then he drew his hands back and folded his arms. Vivian's lips parted slowly until her teeth caught the light and glittered like knives. The ball drifted lazily down the slope of the wheel and bounced on the chromium ridges above the numbers. After a long time and then very suddenly, motion left it with a dry click. The wheel slowed, carrying the ball around with it. The croupier didn't unfold his arms until the wheel had entirely ceased to revolve. "The red wins," he said formally without interest. The little ivory ball lay in red 25, the 3rd number from the 00. Vivian Regan put her head back and laughed triumphantly. The croupier lifted his rake and slowly pushed the stack of $1,000 bills across the layout, added them to the stake, pushed everything slowly out of the field of play. Eddie Mars smiled, put his wallet back into his pocket, turned on his heel and left the room through the door in the paneling. A dozen people let their breath out at the same time and broke for the bar. I broke with them and got to the far end of the room before Vivian had gathered up her winnings and turned away from the table. I went out into the large, quiet lobby, got my hat and coat from the check girl, dropped a quarter in her tray, and went out on the porch. The doorman loomed up beside me and said, "Can I get your card for you, sir?" I said, "I'm just going for a walk." The scroll work along the edge of the porch was wet with the fog. The fog dripped from the Monterey cypresses that shadowed off into the nothing, towards a cliff above the ocean. You could see a scant dozen feet in their direction. I went down the porch steps and drifted off through the trees, following an indistinct path until I could hear the wash of the surf licking at the fog. Low down at the bottom of the cliff, there wasn't a gleam of light anywhere. I could see a dozen trees clearly at one time, another dozen dimly, then nothing at all but the fog. I circled to the left and drifted back towards the gravel path that went around to the stables, where they parked the cars. A little in front of me, I had heard a man cough. My steps hadn't made any sound on the soft, moist turf. The man coughed again, then stifled the cough with a handkerchief or a sleeve. While he was still doing that, I moved forward closer to him. I made him out, a vague shadow close to the path. Something made me step behind a tree and crouch down. The man turned his head. His face should have been a white blur when he did that. It wasn't. It remained dark. There was a mask over it. I waited behind the tree.